got me while I'm hot, huh? All right. Good evening, everybody. How are you? My name is Tommy Ray. I'm an alcoholic. Gosh, it's truly an honor to be here with you guys back down here in Lexington tonight. I've been down here, as Buren said, several times before. I love the breakfast meeting that you guys do. Was it the first Sunday? I love that one. Yeah, I love that one. Me and my sponsor and a couple other guys, last time I was here, came down here for the breakfast meeting and had a ball. And every time I come down here, I have a ball. There's something about, Buren talked about my enthusiasm, but it's something about the spirit of you guys down here in Lexington that makes me feel welcome and warm, and I keep coming back, you know. I remember the first time I come down here in Lexington, Buren talked about a buddy of his, my sponsor. And I was coming out of Columbus at the time. I had went up to Columbus to a conference, the CFC conference, and it was on a Sunday. And I got back home probably about 12 o'clock noon time. I had been up there all weekend at the conference, and there was a voice message on my machine, and it was Buren. And I didn't know him at the time, but he told me he had gotten my name from my sponsor, and that he needed a speaker down in Lexington that night, Sunday night at 7 o'clock. So I'm saying to myself, well, while I missed that one, because I just got back from Columbus. So he told me, I've talked with Bob, and Bob said you'll be here, so I called Bob. So I called Bob, and I said that a little small talk, you know, hey, I just got back in from Columbus, and it was a great weekend, and there's a guy named Buren that says he had spoke with you about me coming down to Lexington. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I just got back from Columbus. I've been up there all weekend, Bob, and I just drove back in. I just walked in the door. And he said, what time is it now? And I said, it's about 12 noon. He said, well, that's 8 o'clock meeting. Get you some sleep and call me when you get back, you know. and that's what I love about my sponsor. You know, he keeps me busy. You know, I love it because he loves me and he loves his sobriety enough to know that this is a program of action, you know. And if I don't take that action, then I know that my alcoholism will return. It's just that simple. And a lot of times I work in treatment, and it's nothing great about that, but I get the blessing of seeing a lot of people that work in that profession become emotionally and mentally drunk without the drink. You see, simply because their attitude and their feelings is that, and it's easy for me to say on any given occasion, you know, I work with drunks and drug addicts all day. I don't need to do that stuff. I don't need a meeting tonight. I don't need to work with a drunk tonight. You know, I don't need to do no step works. I don't need no prayer and meditation. I don't need to do inventories. It's easy for me to say that. And my sponsor loves me enough to where he don't listen to that nonsense. You see, he lets me know that my work is my work. It's a profession. And AA is my vocation, you see. And I love doing what I do. I didn't always love this. I'm one of them drunks that I did not want to be a drunk. I did not want to be an alcoholic. I was not convinced that I was an alcoholic till later on in life. I drank my way all the way to my 44th birthday, and even then I did not want to be an alcoholic. I wanted to be everything else but an alcoholic. And I didn't even know what an alcoholic was. And that's why I drank the way that I drank, because I was trying, as the book said, I was trying to prove to myself that I could drink like other people. You see, and I wanted to be a social drinker. I wanted to be a casual, recreational, moderate drinker. You see, but I didn't know I had this thing, you know, called the phenomenon of craving, that every time I take a drink, you know, I lose control. You see, and as a result of that, my drinking took me a whole lot of places where I really didn't want to go. And even when I got there, I still would not say that it was my drinking. I would say that it was something else, because I did not know what this disease was about, you know. So thank God that today I do know a little bit about it. I'm a member of the Oakland Big Book 2 group. We meet in Newport, Kentucky. Just a bunch of guys get together and we study the book. And if you guys are ever up in Newport on Monday night, 7:30, feel free to come by. We're at 5th and York in Newport, across from the big jail. You can't miss it. My sobriety date is October the 30th of 1991, and for that I'm very, very grateful. You see, and I talk about gratitude as a gift of service, and that's what this whole thing is about. It's about service. To me, it's about service. As you talked about giving back what's freely been given to me, you see. And what I do with that gift of sobriety is my gift back to God and Alcoholics Anonymous. So that's why I show up at meetings like this here. Okay. As I said before, my sobriety date is October the 30th of 1991. I'm to share with you in a general way what I used to be like, what happened, and what I'm like now. And I get my directions from that on page 29 of the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book. I was one of them guys, I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the projects. And I was one of the guys, one of the type of people that believed that everything else was my problem. You know, I believed that I was born into this world an alcoholic. My mother drank, my father drank, everybody in my family drank. 2/3 of my family members have died directly or indirectly as a result of alcoholism. Okay, but there was other medical complications, but they were alcohol problems. And that was a thing with me, to where, again, not knowing what alcoholism was, it was a fun thing to watch. You know, for me, it was a fun thing to watch. I was a little kid, and I used to love to come into the kitchen when my mother and them on the weekend would gather around the table, and they would get the gallon bottle out, or the half a gallon of Kentucky Tavern, or some of that old cheap bourbon that costs about $5 half a gallon, and they would sit around there and they would drink that stuff, and they would get real goofy and real crazy and real violent, and I would just watch them transform before my eyes, and I thought it was funny. You know, they'd start fighting, they'd start laughing, they'd start cheating on each other, they'd start doing whatever they wanted to do. And me being the type of person that I was always a mischievous kid, and I was always into something. And I liked to see them drink, because I didn't know they were blackouts then, but today I know they were blackouts. They would lose their memory. And I would be punished or be threatened to be punished for something that I had done in school or something, and when they started drinking, they'd forget all about it, you see. So I love to see them drink, you know. I'd encourage them on, you need a drink, you know. Let's talk about this later, get you a drink, you know. And I like that. And then my first drink started at the age of 14 years old. I should have started probably when I was about 4 days old, you know, because I at an early age, I look back at that, and I was restless, irritable, and discontented from the very beginning. I hated life, I hated people, I hated everything. I hated myself, you see, and I didn't know why. I knew that there was something wrong with me, but I didn't know what that something was. I did not know, you know, and I spent the biggest part of my life trying to fix that, and I tried it with fixing a whole lot of things. You know, I tried a whole lot of things, you know. Anything that made me feel good, you know, was one of those things. And that's why when I took that first drink at the age of 14, I had an older brother who was clinically blind, and I had gotten designated to walk him to the bootlegger at 3 o'clock in the morning. And that was his job. That was my job, but he delegated me to do the walking. So it was common for him to come home after all the bars had closed down, and he would somehow find me in the room where it was 5 boys and 2 girls, and they didn't have king-size beds then, you know, but we all slept in the same bed in the project. We were poor, and he would somehow make it to that room, and he would grab me by a leg or by an arm or by the nose or by the ear or whatever. He didn't care, long as he got my attention, and he would wake me up, and he would demand that I take him up to the bootlegger. And he was my oldest brother. He had a reputation of being very violent, and he was a lot bigger than me, and so I feared him. You know, I feared him, and I would get up and I would do it. But even at that young age, I was a very resentful and revengeful person. because I would be putting on my shoes and I'd be planning how I'm going to get even with him. And one of my ways of getting even with him by him being blind is that when it came time for him to step up on the curb, I wouldn't tell him, you see. Or when it came time for him to turn the corner, I wouldn't tell him, you see. And I do that little stuff until he get mad enough, because he'd be trying to get that drink in him, you see. And he was a serious drinker, an everyday drinker. And I could see the tension, you know, and the anger in his face. And he would squeeze my arm and tighten it. And that mean that I had to walk faster to get him to that bootlegger. And I would do that. And we'd get up there and he had a little knock on the door, and you'd hear latches slide back behind the door. Never saw a face. And then there would be a bottle that would come out from behind the other door, and it would be wrapped in newspapers. And it would be a fifth of Thunderbird wine. And it cost $1.25. And he would give that fifth of wine to my brother W.C. We called him W.C. His name was William Brown, but we called him W.C. And he would give that fifth of wine to W.C. And W.C. was standing right there in the hallway. And I was a little kid, 14 years old. I was a little short, chubby, fat guy. And I didn't like that neither. And I'd stand there with my big brother, and I'd watch him. And I'd watch him hit the bottom of that bottle, and I'd hear the plastic crack. And I'd see him spin the top off, and the top would shoot over across the hallway on the steps, and I'd be watching that top float across the hallway. And then I'd watch him turn that bottle up, and he'd goggle it down, and I'd watch his Adam's apple going, and he would drink that until it was all gone. And then I'd watch that anger, and I'd watch that fear, and I'd watch all that stuff in his face just disappear. All that tension would just disappear. And then he'd say, ah. And he'd just get just as happy and silly, you see. And then we walked back home. And it got to the point in time, me being as curious as I am, it got to the point to where I was going to ask them for some of that, but I wanted to build up enough nerves. And the opportunity came at one particular time when he couldn't finish it all. And he had a little bit left in there, maybe about half a bottle. And I had mustered up enough nerve, and I said, W.C., let me hit it. And he looked down at me and he said, can you kill it? I said, yeah, I can kill it. And he gave me the bottle, and I did just like he did. And I goggled it down, and I felt the warmth going through me. And at that point in time, when we talk about alcoholism as being a disease of perception, instantaneously it altered my whole perception about life. The people I once hated, I began to love. The people I once began to fear, I lost fear. The hate I had about myself, I felt just as good as anybody else. I was on top of the world, and I fell in love with that. The book talks about drinking for the effect. That's the effect that I had. That's the effect that alcohol had on me. Instantaneously, it changed my perception about myself and the world I lived in and everybody, and I needed that, you see. And from that point on, that's all I wanted to do. And I wasn't good in school. As I said before, I was a short, fat, chubby guy, and I had asthma. And I was cockeyed. And they laughed at me in school. And I didn't like school, but I could play some football. And I could box. And that's all I wanted to do in school. But they wouldn't let me do it because I had asthma. So I didn't want nothing to do with school. So what I would do from that point is that I found alcohol, and I found Thunderbird, and I would skip school, and I would go up to Findlay Market over there, and I would sell shopping bags to get me enough money, and I'd send the older people in there to get me a bottle and buy them a bottle. And I never went to school without my bottle of Thunderbird, you see. And it got to the point to where I stopped going to school at all because it was more important to me to just drink and have fun outside of school because I had no fun in school, you see. And that asthma wouldn't let me do the things that I wanted to do. But one thing about that asthma, I remember I look back at it, and like when we would go to gym and we would be on the horses and climbing the rope and all the stuff that you do in physical ed and gymnastics and stuff, my asthma always got in the way, you see. But I had devised a way for me to drink when I didn't have any money. And one of those ways was that I would go up to the liquor store in Cincinnati, and I would sit on the steps and I'd watch the old people come up and get their bottle. you see, and you couldn't buy liquor on Sundays in Cincinnati or Saturdays till a certain hour. So I would make it my business to get up in front of the state liquor store, and I'd watch these people come in and out of that state liquor store getting a bottle for the weekend. And every time they patrol back and forth, they'd be a little bit tipsier than the last time. And I'd wait for them to get just as tipsy to where I knew they couldn't catch me. And on about that fourth trip, I'd see them walking with the neck of that bottle, and they'd be bending, and I'd snatch that bottle and hit that corner. Now, every time I went to school, my asthma bothered me, but every time I snatched a fifth of that liquor, I didn't have no problem with asthma, you see. None at all. That asthma did not get in the way, you see. And I would dart around that corner, and I'd pop the top like WC had showed me, and I'd choke that stuff down, and I'd be on top of the world again. And I loved it. And I loved it until the point it started costing me problems, and I got put out of school as a result of that at a very young age. And then I kept on drinking, and it started causing me problems. I was in and out of juvenile homes and detention centers as a result of that, but I didn't see it as being my drinking. I seen it as being everything else but my drinking. I thought it was the police, you know. I thought it was somebody in the neighborhood that wasn't minding their business and was focusing on me instead of what they should have been looking at. And all kind of excuses I made for that because I was too young to be an alcoholic, you see. And I kept on drinking and kept on drinking, and I had planned my life. I knew exactly what I wanted to do in life, and I felt as though I didn't need school. You see, I had no need for school. I'm a planner. You know, when I say I'm an alcoholic, I'm an idealistic, romantic dreamer. You see, I had already planned my life at 15 years old, and I knew exactly how it was going to come out. And I was going to retire at the young age of 30 years old with a chain of businesses all across the country. You see, those were my plans. I'm an idealistic dreamer, you see, and I went about putting those plans in motion. You see, because I knew that it was going to require some money, and I didn't need to go to school because there wasn't no money in school. You see, so I got together with a bunch of people who thought like I thought and drank like I drank, and we came up with this plan of ours while we were sitting at an elementary school on a hill. While everybody else was in school, we were sitting outside the school on a hill, and we was plotting and planning how to get rich. And we was drinking some Magnoton. I never will forget. And we drank that Magnoton, and we drank that Magnoton, and the more we drank that Magnoton, the better that ideal became. And the idea was that we'd rob us a bank, you see, and we get all the money that we want, and we'd be rich, and we can go into our own business and everything. And that idea sounded real well. See, I had went through Job Corps after I didn't complete school, and I had learned to trade. I had a talent. I was a meat cutter. I had been trained to be a meat cutter, and I was very good. I went to work at Kroger when I come out of meat cutting school the first year. I worked at all the large meat industries in Cincinnati. And when I say I'm an alcoholic, you know, what I'm saying is that I'm an extremist. And when you're an extremist, nothing is never enough. You see, and I would get those big jobs that I wanted for recognition and all the stuff that it gives, but it wasn't enough for me. You see, I wanted to be somebody. You know, I wanted to prove to them that I did not have to finish school in order to accomplish something in life. You see, and so I went and got this vocational trade, and I was very, very good at it. I had a promising career with it, but when I got it, it wasn't enough. Just like my alcoholism. You see, it wasn't enough, you know, and so I got this job as a meat cutter, and I worked and I worked and I worked and I worked, and I couldn't make enough money, and I couldn't get the prestige, and I couldn't get the stuff that I wanted. So I said, well, forget that. I'm just going to open up my own meat company. And in order to do that, I needed some money. So we got together, and we sat on this hill, and we drank this Magnoton, and we came up with some ideas, and we thought we robbed a bank. And then the Magnoton told us that it was a good idea. And we carried that ideal out, and we won the First National Bank of Cincinnati, and we took their money, about $70,000 in 1969, and came out of there. There was a lot of money in 1969, penny on the dollar tax. And I was 19 years old, and I was rich for about a half an hour. And then I ended up over in the federal prison for 25 years, a 25-year sentence, which cost me 8 years of my life. And now you would have told me that alcohol sent me to prison, I would have argued up and down. Alcohol had nothing to do with it. It was the police. It was Cincinnati. It was not the McNaughton, you see. And so when I come out of that federal prison 8 years later, I was 29 years old, and I blame the city of Cincinnati. It's too square of a town. It's too jive. You know, I'm a big-time bank robber. I'm a gangster. I need to go to the big cities and the bright lights, you see. And so I moved to Chicago. And that's where my drinking really took off. I got me a job like the book talks about. We use our talents and our abilities to build a bright outlook, and then we tear it down with a series of senseless drinking sprees, you see. And that nailed me to the cross, you see, because that's exactly what I did in my life. I could get the job, but I never could keep the job. And I got job after job after job after job till I ended up being blackballed in the whole state of Illinois. And to this day, I still can't work in the food industry because I never would show up. You know, I'd get drunk on the job, or I'd do the stuff that we do, you see. And so I lost that. And then I became a bartender. And that's when it really took off. You see, because people in Chicago love to drink. They love to work and they love to drink. They're immigrants from the South. They work hard and they drink hard. I don't know, I got this thing called alcoholism. So I want to drink just like they want to drink, you see. And I started drinking. And it was, you know, common to just come to work at 3 o'clock in the evening and go behind the bar. And at that time I was drinking gin, Tanqueray. That was my drink. And get me a shot of Tanqueray. And then that shot would have to have a shot of Tanqueray. And then that shot would have to have a shot of Tanqueray. And I'd have to keep on drinking Tanqueray until they would find me in the stock room at the end of the night. And I've never done any work. And so, me being the alcoholic that I am, I said I'll change drinks. I'll stop. It's the Tanqueray. You see, it's that Tanqueray that's doing that. So I'll just cut off the Tanqueray. And I met this girl who was the manager of that place, and she drank Christian Brothers brandy. So I say, and that's kind of smooth. It sounds smooth too, you know. Big man like me, I can handle some brandy, you know. And so I changed the brandy, you know. And I remember we would be setting in at home. We later married, and we would be setting in. And she was a social drinker, and she was trying to make me a social drinker, and I was trying to become a social drinker, you see. And I wanted to drink like her, you see, because she could take a drink and wouldn't have to drink no more, you know, till whenever she decided to. You know, and she couldn't understand why I couldn't do that, and I couldn't understand it neither. But she would come in, and she would call, and she would say, well, what you want to do tonight? And I'd say, well, you know, let's stay in, you know, and just spend the evening in. And she said, I'll stop by Rothschild and pick up a bottle, and then we'll just have a romantic evening at home. And I'd say, okay. And that was our plan. And she'd stop at Rothschild and bring the fifth of Christian Brothers brandy in, and she'd come in, and she'd take her a sip of brandy, and she'd go and you know, freshen up and go down in the bedroom ready for a romantic evening. And I'd be sitting there at that table romancing that bottle until every drop was gone, you see. And I could not get away from that table. I have to drink every drop of it. And then when all of that's gone, then I have to go out in the street and get some more, you see. And it wasn't no telling when I would come back. And I started drinking out in the street, and I started drinking with the people in the street, and I started bringing those people in the street at home, you know. And it drove my wife out of there, you see, because I was bringing the gutter into the house, you see. And shortly after that, I remember being fired from the bartender job because it was so much embarrassment to her, because every time that I was supposed to work from 3 to clothing, they would have to call her to come down there and close that place up because I would be drunk back there in the stockroom, you see. And then they end up firing me, and I end up over there in Statesville Penitentiary because the guy that owned the place, my mind told me that he was firing me because he wanted my wife. and he pulled a pistol, and you don't pull a pistol on me. I'm a drunk, you know. You don't pull. I'm revengeful, you know. And I was still on federal parole, and I'm coming down Douglas Boulevard about 100 miles an hour with 3 guns in my car. And even in Chicago, you can't be traveling with sawed-off shotguns, you see. So I ended up back over in Statesville for 5 more years, and that stuff went on and on and on, and I didn't know that it was about the alcoholism, you know. So I come out of there, and she was gone, and I'm in the streets of Chicago, and I'm drinking every day, man. I'm over there on 47th and Michigan Avenue, and I'm drinking. You know, I'm just living the drink, man. You know, I'm just living the drink, and I'm staying down at Frederick Douglass High School in the basement down there. I'm going up on 47th in Michigan up there at the stop and go up there, and I'm eating out of the store, you see. By this time, I got to have me a drink every day. I got to have it, you see. I got to have a drink because it had gotten to the point to where I couldn't eat until I drank, you see. And so I go in the store and I fill the cart up. In them days, you could kind of like, you know, you could eat out of the store and it wasn't theft, you know. And I'd fill up the shopping cart and I just eat out of the shopping store cart, you know, and just leave the stuff in there. As long as you don't bring it outside, it wasn't theft, you know. And then I chase it down with a fifth of their wine, some of the old cheap wine, and I leave out of there. Then it got to the point I got bought out of all the stores up there on Michigan Avenue, you know. So now I'm just bombing, man. I'm bombing and begging in the streets of Chicago, man, panhandling, you know. And I had 2 brothers who preceded me in this fellowship. And one of them is still alive today, oldest, and he's been sober now for a very long time, about 30 years, and that's not nothing in terms of longevity. It's just to say that as a result of that, he and I do have a relationship today, because there was a time when he and I as brothers did not have a relationship because of my alcoholism and because of his alcoholism. So at any point, he had gotten sober and he was in this fellowship with my brother Jimmy, and somebody notified him and they came up to Chicago and got me and brought me back to Cincinnati, brought me back home, and that's when the treatment centers started. They started putting me in and out of treatment centers, and I'm not an alcoholic and I don't need to be in treatment, and so they put me in there and I leave out, you see. And that went on for a period of time because I'm the kind of alcoholic you ain't gonna tell me what to do, you see. And this is my life, and you don't tell me how to run my life, and I'm grown, and on and on and on and on. You know how we is about that stuff. So I left, you know, and they stopped. They gave up. You know, they gave up. They got tired of it. So I kept on doing what I was doing, and I think the last treatment center they put me in, I was able to muster up about 6 months of dry drunken. You know, I wanted to drink because I wasn't convinced that I was an alcoholic. I wanted to drink, but I also found the need to, my mind was telling me that if I got back to Chicago and got my job back and got my wife back, I would be okay, period. And that's what I was about doing. So I come out of that treatment center, stayed dry for about 6 months, still not believing I'm alcoholic, wanting to drink, but didn't drink, and I'm mad and crazy as you know what. And so I landed a job down in Cincinnati over in Avondale, J&W Market, as a butcher, as a meat cutter, and did real good again. You know, using my talents to build a bright outlook and just tearing the structure right out from under myself because I'm still not convinced I'm alcoholic. And I get that job like I had gotten all the others, and I start to work, and that went on for about probably about 6 months, 8 months or so, and I was saving my money to get back to Chicago, and then I started back drinking because I had proved to my brothers that, you know, I can do this deal. I can get a job, you know. I am somebody. You know, I'm not no alcoholic. I didn't stay sober, you know. So I'm going to this job, and it gets to the point to where the loneliness set in, and I'm living in this apartment building, and I'm scared to go home. I'm scared to go home. I could not stand living by myself. You see, the fear and the loneliness just ate me apart because I didn't have a solution. You see, I was just dry. I didn't have a solution. And eventually I ended up drinking again. Started off, that's the time that I went on a maintenance program with the coolers, the Long Island iced tea and all the other little fancy coolers that they had. I had a little maintenance plan for that. And I would show them, it's just the hard stuff, the brown stuff. I can drink the coolers, So I started that stuff, and not knowing I got this thing called alcoholism, not knowing I got this phenomenal craving and this obsession, I started off, and it wasn't long after. Now I'm going to work, and I'm drinking the beer, stealing the beer from the produce department, hiding it over in the meat department. And the thing about that is that, in the walk-in to the meat department, it's about 15 feet high, and we got about 40 crates of chicken in the walk-in, and whole chickens. And I'm finding myself stealing a 12-pack of beer, a 24-pack of beer to last me through those 8 hours, because by now I've got the shakes and stuff, and I'm working on this bandsaw, and my hands are shaking, and I'm scared I'm going to cut my hand off, so I got to have a drink. So what I do is I take all of the guts out of the chicken, and I'm plugging beer in cans of beer, So I'm going back in the walk-in, and I'm drinking me a 12-ounce can of beer, and just to keep the shakes off, and I'm coming out there, and I'm drinking chicken juice and ice and everything, And the stuff is running out down my face. People laughing at me. I don't know what they're laughing at, And, that's that sneaky drinking that we talk about, And, so I finally, like everything else, I lose that job like all the rest of them. I lose it, get fired, And now I'm just on the streets of Cincinnati, same like I was in Chicago, walking the streets of Cincinnati, man. And I'm in the after-hour joints, and I end up getting put out there because I'm a violent drinker. When I drink, I get violent. I'm a real alcoholic that we talk about it in the book. I do incredible, tragic things while drinking. Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, and guys would tell me, say, man, you're one of the best guys in the world, but when you get that stuff in you, you're a different person. And I heard that, and I dismissed it, because I didn't know what they was talking about. And so as a result of that, I can't go into the after-hour joints no more, man. And so I'm walking the streets, and I lost the apartment because I ain't got no job, and I'm walking the streets, man. I'm just, walking the streets and begging and bombing and dying, man. That's all I'm doing, and ashamed. Because my family didn't want to have nothing else to do with me. And so I remember it was October, the middle of October, man. That was my last drunk, man. And I'm walking up Harvey Avenue, and I got a couple dollars in my pocket, and I ain't got nowhere to go. And it's, I'm just walking the streets till the sun come up, to start all over again. And I'm walking up Harvey, and it's about 4 o'clock in the morning. And I have this thought, and do what you do best, And I'm a taker. I've always been a taker because I felt that the world owed me. Being born from a family of poverty, I could justify my behavior and my actions by stealing. That is, the world had owed me something, or somebody owed me something. So I blamed everybody for my circumstances, and that was okay because it made me feel good inside of myself. You see, I could justify it. And when I had this thought, do what you do best, all I knew all my life, my sole purpose of my life was setting a bad example. And I lived in total disregard to everything and everybody. And when I had that thought, I said, well, what I do best is I take. I'm a bank robber. Because, see, I thought I was a gangster. I thought I wanted to be anything and everything but an alcoholic, you see. And I said, well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go in there when they open this bank up here on People's Corner, and I'm going to take that money. I'm going to rob them, and I'm going back to Chicago, and I'm going to get my life back together. And I had a couple dollars. I walked up there, and I stopped in the Pony Keg, and I bought me a fifth of Red Rose wine, because by now I was drinking a fifth a day. And I chuckled it down the way WC had taught me, and I bust the bottle on the side of the building, and I waited for them to open the bank up, and when they opened the bank, I went in and I did what I do best. I took, and I got away. And by the end, I didn't know that my alcoholism had progressed, and I had gotten to the point of blackouts, and I forgot to leave town, you see. Me and Greg was talking about that at the conference, I could identify with the guy that he was talking about, because, we go to blackouts, you see. We have the greatest of plans, but we forget them, And I forgot to leave town. you know. And so I end up broke because I'm a big shot, you know, and I like to party, and I end up broke. And by this time, I didn't know that I was really trying to kill myself, and I really wanted to die. I couldn't tell you that, though, because I had said that, well, I'm going to keep on taking until somebody take my life. And I went on about a 16-day bank robbing spree and drinking spree, and I ended up robbing 4 banks, and I had 1 felonious assault, 4 bank robberies and 1 felonious assault. And I stood before Judge Norbert Nadeau, and I was facing 45 to 75 years. And I had been deemed incorrigible because I had been in and out of prison all of my life. And so he sent me on off to the penitentiary. And I was used to that. It wasn't no big deal, you know. See, because I had said when I was walking up Harvey Avenue, my thinking was that I can go into this bank and all they can do is send me back to the penitentiary or blow my brains out, period. That's all they can do. They can send me back to the penitentiary or blow my brains out. And I didn't care, whichever one. You see, I was at that point. I had nowhere to go. I was afraid to live. I wanted to stop drinking, but I didn't know how, because I didn't know anything about this thing called alcoholism, you see. And I was eaten up from the inside. You know, I was so alone and so afraid, you see. And that's what the book talks about, that jump off place, that point of loneliness that few of us know, you know. And so that's why I went in there, man. It wasn't about the money, you know. I was hoping they'd put a bullet in my head, you see. I just wanted them to stop it. I just wanted to stop, you know, and I didn't know how. And so I went on in there and did what I did, and then I ended up before Judge Nadeau, a self-imposed crisis, and he sent me on off to those places where we're going. I ended up over there, and I had been in them places all my life, and I had no fear. I knew how to do the hustle, you know, and the extortion and all the stuff that we do in those places, so that wasn't a big deal. I didn't know how to live sober in those places. You see, I didn't know how to act normal in those places because I had become an animal and I had become a taker, and I didn't want to do that no more. And I remember pulling up to that gun tower, and I remember seeing that guy with that 30-06, and I remember thinking back when my mind was telling me that all I could do another bit, and my mind wasn't talking to me no more. It talked to me that morning and told me I could do another bit, but now my heart is talking to me and it's telling me I can't do this. I'm 44 years old, and I got 45 to 75 years in prison, and I know I'm going to die in this place, you see. And I don't want to do it the way I did the rest of those bits, you see. Reality has set in, and I don't have an answer, you see. And so I go on in there, and I'm walking around this penitentiary yard, and there's 3,000 people in there, man, and I'm the only person in there. I don't see nobody out on the yard. I don't see nobody nowhere. You know, and I'm going crazy inside my mind. You see, I'm literally going crazy. So I put in a kite to see the psychiatrist, a guy named Earl Stump, whom I hated with a passion. Today I love him because he was the first person in my life that ever told me the truth. And I went to Earl Stump, and he had my files on his desk, and he's listening to that nonsense I'm talking, and he tells me, Tommy, he says, I'm looking at your history, and you've been coming in and out of these places since you was 15 years old. You're now 45. He said, if I were you this time, I'd try and find the problem of what keep bringing me in here. I think it's alcohol. Everything that you've ever done, every time you've ever been in these places, alcohol and drugs were involved in it. And I said, with my keen alcoholic mind, I said, are you insinuating I'm an alcoholic, man? And he had this corncob pipe, and he reared back in his arm, in his chair, lazy boy chair, and he said, I don't know what the hell he is, but you got 45 years to figure it out. I felt that small. And reality set in. And I thought about what he had said. Every time I've been in them places, it was a direct result of my drinking. And And that was the first time that I had ever thought about that. And it was beginning to make sense. And he sent me over to a treatment program. I had been in and out of treatment programs, and that's when I got introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous. They had some people coming down from Columbus who were not counselors. They were just alcoholics. And they came in there and they taught from the AA Big Book. And they started talking about the mental obsession and the physical allergy from doctor's opinion. And it began to make sense to me because I started reflecting back on my drinking history, and I was able to identify that obsession, you see, and I was able to identify that phenomenon of craving, you see. And then I started reading that book, and then they told me to start going to those meetings, and I got into a Monday Night Big Book meeting inside that penitentiary. And for the 8.5 years that I was there, I never missed that Monday night meeting. And there was old timers that came in, and when they read that book, they shared their perspective of what the book was saying, and that helped me to see myself. And I remember reading and more about alcoholism, the real alcoholic. That was the very first time in my life that I stopped challenging whether or not I'm alcoholic, because I got a description of myself from that little inscription there. You see, because I would find myself, I was sitting there and I said, damn, I drink like that, I act like that, I think like that. Everything in there nailed me to the cross. And I remember saying to myself, I'm alcoholic. You know, I remember conceding to my innermost self right there inside that penitentiary in a Monday Night Big Book, because I couldn't argue with it no more. You see, I had been looking for a definition of an alcoholic. You see, and there is no definition of an alcoholic. Even in the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, you'll never find a definition. What you will find is a description of an alcoholic. And it's all through the personal stories, you see. And that's the power of the description. It allowed me to see myself like everybody else had saw me. I saw myself for the very first time, and I stopped looking for a definition. And then I started doing the stuff that they told me to do. I got a sponsor. I started going to those meetings, man. They had 3 a week. And I had been there about 6 years there, man. I was miserable. And I started going to those meetings, and they had me stand up at the door shaking hands, you see. And I remember every time I'd shake a hand, man, you know, and do the stuff, the little bitty stuff, you know, set the meeting up and all that little stuff. And I remember leaving out of those meetings feeling real good, you know. And the more I kept doing it, the more better I start feeling, you see. And I'm inside the penitentiary, and I'm becoming free, and I don't even realize it. That's the paradox of this stuff. You see, how can you be free inside of a prison? I became free of myself, free of that resentment, free of that anger, free of that fear, you see. I began to find some freedom inside the penitentiary, you see. And it got to the point where I started doing those stuff, doing the things that they suggested I do, and I'd wait for them. I used to sit there on the yard and I'd wait for them guys, and they always showed up. They was like clockwork, you know, and they were there. And I fell in love with them guys because that was my attraction to Alcoholics Anonymous, because I'm thinking these men have jobs and they have families, and they live in Columbus, and they fill their cars up and they drive down to that penitentiary in Ross County to see an ex-convict, to see an ex-father, to see a bum like me whose own family won't come see him, you see, and they didn't want nothing in return. You see, and they humanized me. They shook my hand. They smiled. They talked. You know, they gave me that care. They gave me that what I had been looking for all of my life. You see, and I remember in one of the meetings I said, if I ever get out of here, that's the kind of man I'm gonna be. You see, I'm gonna do that stuff what they're doing. You see, and I prayed. I didn't even believe in a God, but I prayed to something. You know. And I kept doing what they were doing because I trusted them. Because they was on time, they were dignified, they were respected, you know, they were men of honor. And I wanted to be just like that, you see. And I kept going to those meetings, man, and I got a sponsor. And 8 years came, and it was time for me to go to parole board. I went up to the parole board, 8.5 years, and they told me I was a 5-time loser, and I was incorrigible, and they didn't parole people like me. And blew me away. And I walked out of there, and my first reaction was to show them. And I had a drink in me 8.5 years, and I'm mad as I ever been in my life. I want to turn the tables over. I want to charge toward the gun tower. I want to hit the fence. I want to do all of that stuff. But somehow I end up going back to my cell, and I picked up the phone and I called that guy who was my sponsor. And I told him. And I love sponsors, man. They're so wise, you know. They so wise, man. They got two-word answers to everything, you know. Nothing analytical, you know what I mean? Just do it, you know what I mean? And I love that, you know, because that's what I needed at that time. Because this guy said, I said, look, man, I just took them 8.5 years. They gave me 36 months. And he said, that's their decision, Tommy. What's yours? I said, you don't understand, man. You know, I just took them 8.5 years, and they gave me 36 months, 3 more years. And he said, that's their decision. What's yours? And I didn't understand what he was saying. And he said, I'll be down there in a couple of days. In the meantime, I'll send you a letter. And he come down there, and we stood up there in the visiting room. And he told me, he said, Tommy, he said, if you don't get in Alcoholics Anonymous, you're going to die in here. And I knew he was telling the truth because I was dying on the inside of spiritual death. I was dying from the loneliness, you see. And I say, I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous, man. I go to all the meetings, you know. I write you on a regular basis. I pray. I do everything y'all tell me to do, man. And he said, Tommy, he said, you got a real good meeting program. He said, but that's not Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, Alcoholics Anonymous is about the 12 steps of recovery. If you don't take those steps, Tommy, you're going to die in here. And I said, I took them steps, man. I took them steps in the North Yard up under the gun tower before I went to the parole board, and we all got back and forth. And he said, you know, I know you didn't take them steps, Tommy. He said the third step says we made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God. That means God's going to take care of you. He said, you've been praying to get out of prison? I said, yeah. He said, you don't have to pray to get out of prison. You think God don't know you're in prison? If you think God don't know you're in prison, you better get you another God, you know. And he was laughing about it. I ain't seen nothing funny, you know. That's why I love sponsors, you know. And he said, and you've been praying, you still filing them appeals? The people ain't gonna let you out of, and I was a lawyer, man. I was one of them jailhouse lawyers. I had learned that early, you know, and they had always got me out of jail, you know, manipulating the system, demystifying the law is what we called it. But anyhow, and I had went all the way up to the Ohio Supreme Court, you know, with litigation. I was pretty good, but I couldn't get out of prison. I get other people out, yeah. But, yeah, he said, you still filing those appeals? Stop filing them appeals. The people ain't going to get you out. Them the people that put you in here, you know. And that made sense, you know. And so he said, so I said, well, what do I do? And he said, Tommy, you pray for knowledge of God's will for you. And that's all you pray for. If you were God and you had all the power, would you leave your child in prison? I said, no. He said, God wouldn't leave you in here. He said, you pray for knowledge of his will for you and the power to carry it out. And that's all you pray for. And he gave me a promise. He said, I promise you, Tommy, if you do that, things will happen so fast you won't be able to keep up with them. And we took that third step prayer right there in the visiting room. And then he told me to do a fourth, and we did the fifth out in the rain by the chapel, me and a guy named Billy. And I went back to my cell, did 6 and 7. Had me doing amends, paying, I didn't get for $36 a month state pay, and I had to give $2 to each bank. So that wasn't fun at all there. And I'm trying to pay off thousands of dollars paying $2, you know. But I learned that was the willingness, you know, that was the willingness. And then, 60 days after that, man, 60 days after I come into my cell, and I got a letter from the Department of Parole, Reggie Wilkins, the director of parole, and they called me back to the parole board and they gave me a parole. And that had never happened, and I didn't understand it. And I called him and I said, man, I don't understand this here. I said, man, they just called me back and they gave me a parole. And he said, what is you don't understand about it? And I say, it ain't never happened before. And And he said, simple, Tommy. He says, 2 time frames. It's God's time and it's man's time. And things happen a whole lot faster in God's time. You've been trying to get yourself out here for 8.5 years and you ain't went nowhere. And it took him, 60 days? And he said, when you get out of here, if you're not in an AA meeting within 24 hours of your release, you're on your way back. And I knew that was true. Because in the 36-month flop that I had gotten, the 60 days I stayed there, I was able to see guys who had did 10, 15, whatever time they did, and they were active in Alcoholics Anonymous inside the penitentiary. But when they got out, they didn't follow up. This is a program of follow through. They didn't follow through. And I would talk with them guys on the 12-step call just to find out what they didn't do, so I wouldn't do that. And none of them went to meetings. None of them continued on with sponsorship. None of them continued on with any of the stuff that we have to do on a daily basis, contingent to our spiritual conditioning to get that daily reprieve. You see, none of them did that. And I didn't want them to do that. And so when I got out of there, I got to Cincinnati. It took me about an hour and a half to drive down from the penitentiary. And I was up in Oak Street. I went up to Oak Street because I was convinced. I was convinced by my own experience. Nobody had to tell me. That's the gift of our experience. You see, I was convinced by my experience of what he said was true. And he hadn't told me anything wrong up until that point. And I trusted him. And I went up to Oak Street, and I was there within my first, and I was telling the driver, man, I got to get to Oak Street within an hour, you know. And, you know, I'm on a time, you know. And I get there, and most humblingest thing I ever done, man, when they asked for, are there any newcomers like we did tonight, first time there, I stood up and he said, I want you to tell him your name is, and tell him what you're about. And I stood up and I said, my name is Tommy Ray, I'm an alcoholic and I'm an ex-convict. And I don't want to drink anymore and I don't want to die and go back to penitentiary. Will you help me? And I got a sponsor right there. And that sponsor put me right in the center of Alcoholics Anonymous. And they put me out in Cincinnati Intergroup. And for the first 6 months, I worked with drunks on the telephone. And I loved it so well, I stayed there a year. You see. Then I got a job as a dishwasher. I'm an ex-convict, you know. Had a big criminal record. And dishwashing job was the only job I could get. But thanks to this program, I learned gratitude. See, I had been in the penitentiary where we don't get but $36 a month. You see, when they said they'll pay me minimum wages of $6 an hour, man, that was a lot of money. You see, and I didn't have no pride. You see, so I'd wash your dish because I had washed them for free inside those penitentiaries. So I'm standing over people waiting on them to get through with their dinner so I could take it. You know, I ain't got no pride. And I politely take their dish and proudly go back to the dish room. And I got promoted within 6 months of that to a grill cook. And then within a year, I became assistant manager of that Frisch's. And it was my job to close Frisch's and take the money and the slips to the night deposit. You see, and I took honor in that. You see, and never a penny came up missing. And I'm a bank robber, you see. And I could never find them shots when I was out there. I never could, you see. And I went on back to school. And my life has come kind of full circle where I'm at today because everything that I did on the other side, I'm beginning to see an opportunity of coming full circle with just the opposite. I was hiding in the drop-in center from those police for a period of time. Then I got a job down at the drop-in center. Then I went back to school, and I went up to Columbus to take a certification test for the work I do now. And that's not to brag or boast. I ain't really impressed with it. I'm a certified chemical dependency drug and alcohol counselor, you know. And nobody had never went up there and passed that test the first time, and I did it, you see. And it gave me an opportunity to come full circle with my treatment experience, you see. And the other thing, the spiritual piece of it for me is that it allows me to see the power of the God in my life, the loving God that's in my life, because right here as I speak right now, and I went to work today, and I assessed a guy yesterday, first day in treatment, and the same guy that I assessed was in the penitentiary with me in 1990 and 1991, and in the treatment program with me in 1990 and 1991. And I asked myself, why is it that he's still trying to get sober and I've been sober? Why is it? I don't believe that my God loves me any more than he loves them. That's his child too. And I don't believe I'm any more special or have any more talent or any more ability than that man. But what I do believe is that there's something that I do that he don't do. And that's that I surrender on a daily basis. I surrender on a daily basis. I do the same things today that I was taught in my first day sober. I get on my knees in the morning. I get on my knees at night, and I ask God to guide me through the day and to show me how to be helpful with service for another human being. And that's what the book talks about. Our sole purpose as recovering alcoholics is to be of maximum service to God and our fellow man. And that's what I try and do today. You see, I'm not perfect. A lot of problems come through my life. But one thing about I have a solution today. You see, I didn't have that before. I have the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and those steps tell me that whatever problem I have in life, if I can admit to it, if I can surrender to it, I can transcend and rise above it. And I know it's truth because I've been sober for the last 14 years. And the only time I go back in the penitentiary is when I carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was up in Lebanon Correction Monday night. I'll be back up in Chile, up in Columbus next month. I'll be wherever God sends me because my purpose in life today is to be a good example. You see, I don't take no more. I don't hate nobody no more, not even myself. I don't take money out of the bank today. I put money in. You see. All right. I got 2 major credit cards, MasterCards. And they don't know that because I'm an ex-bank robber. They know it because I'm a responsible working person. And I learned that through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and people like you. And I love you and God bless you. And thank you all for listening.